Hello and welcome back to Radio Free Urbanism, a podcast about urbanism and stuff. My name is Alex Williams. I am one of your hosts today, and we have a full crew today. We've got myself, Alex Williams, as previously mentioned. We have Nick Laporte.
Hello and welcome back, everybody.
And we have Ethan Myers.
Welcome back, you beautiful people. It's so great to be here.
And we, of course, also have Patrick. I don't know if you use your last name on the internet or not, but Patrick, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you.
And for our live audience, Jen and Skitch here are in the chat. So hello, you guys. You might notice we have two Patricks on the screen. It's because one is for the audio, one is for the video. We had some technical difficulties, but we got it all sorted out. And
now, if you're watching...
On the YouTube release, it's going to be
You're not going to notice it all.
Yeah. But yeah, welcome Jen and Skitch. Jen and Skitch are in the live chat. They're able to ask us questions, ask Patrick questions, and contribute to the conversation as we go on because they
Alex,
are
how are they able to do that?
subscribers on Patreon. Ethan, I was getting to it. I was getting
Well,
there.
you know what? Sometimes we got to ask, how can we get to that?
You can get to it by patreon.com/radiofreeurbanism, and you can become a patron for as little as $1 a month. That helps us keep the lights on with the show because Riverside is not a cheap server or program service, thing to run. But it works great, and we're really excited to have people in the live chat. So yeah, Jen and Skitch, if you want to ask some questions, if you got some questions for Patrick, any contributions, you're welcome to do it. Patrick, before we get into it, give us a quick bio about who you are.
Yeah. So, a little bit about myself. I grew up in rural Ontario, and from there, I have experience being on a farm, villages, going to school in a town, and then eventually going to a big city for school, like post-secondary. So I think I have a wide variety of experiences, different urban environments. So that kind of what led to eventually making True Communities, seeing, I guess, just a bit more of a nicer approach to how we can address urbanism challenges and how we use that to create communities that will thrive. So that's my goal of the channel, and I have a blog as well. So some things are more technical, some things are more, at least I want to try to be a bit more on the scientific side of things when looking at human psychology and such. But yeah. So that's my experience.
That's great. We're stoked to have you on the show. This has kind of been a long time coming. We've been chatting for a few months. We're collaborating on a video. See, you guys, I have proof. Somebody knows that I've been working on something. Jen in the chat says small town to big city, same here. Jen grew up in a small town in northern Alberta. So we're excited to get your perspective on the show and hear about your experience. If you want to check out Patrick's channel, it's True Communities on YouTube. And where do people find your blog?
It's truecommunities.wordpress.com.
Perfect.
I haven't paid for it yet.
Hey, that's okay. Why pay if you can?
Gotta start somewhere.
Yeah,
Exactly. I'm also on Instagram, Threads if you use that. I think I'm still on Twitter, X, and then also on Blue Sky as well. So,
perfect.
A variety. You'll find me somewhere.
Yeah, we'll have those links in the show notes. But yeah, all right. Well, let's get into it. We've got a few updates from each of us actually today. Nick, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. This is continuing from last week when I was talking about how I needed to kind of get off of social media. I was getting too riled up with conversations around urbanism, and just the kind of discourse gets me fired up, and I needed to take a break. Well, I didn't take my own advice. I didn't stop. However, what I did do was I chilled out a bit and understood that we can't have these big conversations about urbanism, how to make our cities better within these small little boxes, right? and these limited word counts. So I just was like, hey, that if we can't do that, that's fine. I'm going to put out some information there and just leave it. And that's what I've been doing, and it's been good. And I've actually had some good conversations with people in the end this past week. So I think it's good for me to just keep doing that, because I think the best way to actually learn about this stuff and learn about yourself and how to respond to certain questions or objections is to talk with people, even if it's in these limited places, because then you can just more easily bring up the facts and the points that you would want to talk about in the more serious places where we actually talk about them, like here on Radio Free Urbanism, which, you know what, we need to get some like detractors in here. We need some controversy, and not just between Alex and Ethan. We need like get some real car brains in here in the near future. I think that's a good idea.
That could certainly be interesting.
It could.
I kind of have this opinion about debates that it doesn't really do anything to further a conversation or to, like make any new information come to light. It's really just about, getting people more entrenched in their boxes is usually how I feel about debates. And I do think, however, that one-on-one conversations, going for coffee with people who have different perspectives than you, can be pretty effective on both sides to come to appreciate other people. So maybe we'll see if Nick brings on any controversial guests. We'll have to wait and see.
I'll just get my dad on here. We can talk about stuff.
Hey, that'd be interesting. Ethan, you've got an update for us.
I do. But it's not as exciting as Nick bringing on someone like Randall O'Toole or something like that. But it is, we are going to have a little extra episode coming out on Friday for the patrons, both on Radio Free Urbanism patrons and for Climate and Transit patrons. And that is a nice little one-on-one interview with Frederick from the Rio Grande Plan. So if you folks want to see that, it'll be coming out this Friday. Probably sometime in the morning, but it will be coming out both if you're a patron of Radio Free Urbanism or if you're a patron of Climate and Transit. You'll be able to see this extra little interview that I did.
That's going to be fantastic. And for the people who aren't familiar with the Rio Grande Plan, do you want to explain briefly what this is, Ethan?
Absolutely. So if you haven't heard about the Rio Grande Plan, we've actually done a few little segments on it throughout the show. So if you're a friend of the channel, you probably already know. But for those who don't know, the Rio Grande Plan is actually a fairly large, ambitious, very citizen-generated project to actually bring a revitalization project to an existing train station in downtown Salt Lake City, not only to revive the train station, but to make transit better in the region and to improve the neighborhood surrounding it. So it's a big project, and talking to one of the main people behind it, because it is a very grassroots project, it was a very exciting interview, and I can't wait for y'all to see it.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it. I've had access to it because it's in the account here, but I've not tuned in yet. But I'm looking forward to that. And I'm looking forward to everyone supporting the Rio Grande Plan as well, because it is actually, honestly, probably the coolest and biggest citizen-led infrastructure idea kind of project in North America right now. As far as I know, it is super cool, and there's lots of cool like actual visuals and resources for people to check out. But my update, I published a video. I hold your applause. I know, very impressive. Everyone's very impressed with me. It's been like 5 months, I think. The last one I did was in April, and I talked about some of the issues and frustrations that I have with buses, and how I've overcome some of those things, and some of the actual like solutions to those things. And Skitch says, an incredible video. Thank you very much, Skitch. And Jen says, bravo, Alex. Thank you, guys. So it was pretty cool. And Ethan says the video sucked, but he's glad that I'm finally doing something with my life.
Very
Thanks,
true.
Ethan. Yeah, many people are saying this.
Many people are saying this.
But yeah, so that's been fun. Let's get into the news stories, Nick.
We got me already? We're already here. Okay, well,
We're already here.
This is coming from Ontario. We got more controversy coming out of Ontario as it happens. So Doug Ford, who's the premier of Ontario, wants to ban bike lane construction on streets where they would take away space from cars. That's right. So this is coming from an internal document that was revealed, at least. The Ontario government is considering bringing forward legislation that could prohibit the installation of bike lanes when lanes for motor vehicles are removed. The premier said his government intends to address traffic congestion in the upcoming legislation. He said, we need to focus on transportation that gets people from point A to point B in a very quick fashion, and also stated that that biking networks, especially in Toronto, was slowing down paramedics, police, and fire looking to get around cities at speed. Let me just take a note there. That is a bold-faced lie. Not only is that against the knowledge that we know that that's not the case, but actually from the city's data showing that streets like Bloor Street, where they added a bike lane, actually had improved response times from emergency vehicles. So it's just like, what the heck's going on? Anyway, this is crazy. This is wild. This is one of those things where the premier, which is, if you don't know, is basically like the governor of Ontario, is stepping into cities' rights to change their streets. And it's just overstepping, in my opinion. Like, they need to worry about other things that affect the whole province as a whole. It needs to worry about healthcare, and that's a whole other thing we're not going to get into, especially in Ontario. But I want to let you guys talk about this for a minute. What do you think? Who wants to go first?
You know
Any
what?
takers?
I will. I will. The American will go first. So let's just think about this. Even if you want to take a non-urbanist perspective on this, this is a very, very massive overreach by the state by the province on this level, just purely because it is meddling in local decisions way too unreasonably at this level. I mean, it's literally going all the way down to the most basic street design for cities and saying, hey, you want to do this project to your city? You've done the research on it? No, I know better because I was elected. So therefore, you cannot make the choice on your local streets. Does that not sound crazy?
No, he's like completely ignoring the experts. That's what's happening here. Like, we all know that this is, they want to reduce congestion. We know the answer. We know what the answer is. What is it, guys? It's focusing
alternative modes.
Exactly.
It's another lane.
Focusing on things other than cars will reduce your congestion and make it easier to drive. And that's the most frustrating thing about this, is when people say, oh, I can't do X, Y, Z on a bike. You don't have to. You don't have to. You can still drive. And maybe you will want a bike, and occasionally when you need a car, you can use it. And that's fine. Yeah. It's just so frustrating. But I want to know, though, is this just like a litmus test? Did they leak this on purpose? Or, like, does Doug Ford know that this is all bullshit and he doesn't care and he's just pandering to his base? Because let me tell you, I got lots of friends in Ontario, and a lot of them probably like this. I might ask them later. They probably like this idea because they hate bike lanes, because they live in small towns, they drive big trucks, they're quintessentially car-brained. Like, it is what it is. Is this just pandering to those people?
I don't know. I want to hear Patrick's perspective on this, because you are in Ontario. You live there.
Yes. It is very interesting when we first saw, like, that's ridiculous. And it made me think of one of the projects happening in Kitchener right now where it's a overbuilt, shortest section of 4-lane roads that the region actually, they want to paint, essentially remove two of those lanes of that 4-lane road to paint a bike lane. And they're doing that. They would like to do more, but they're like, we'll at least be able to get to the painting and without minimum, I guess, trouble. So I'm thinking, okay, if that actually goes through, will that stop that project that is potentially, I think, planned for 2025, maybe 2026 at the latest? So that's definitely a concern. And just kind of silly when you think of it. There's so many overbuilt roads that we have in Ontario, and depending where you are, especially like when you go to London, Kitchener has and Waterloo has its own as well. I imagine Toronto has a couple as well. But there's just so much space that we do have available, especially when we do narrow some of our lanes down from, like, I think a lot of them are 3.5 meter wide. You can narrow those down to 3.2. A lot of them you can definitely easily fit a bike lane in there, especially if you are even just narrowing the road a little bit, because you can and you probably should, so you can actually slow down traffic. in some areas where it's a little more dense or you want slower traffic anyways. So yeah, I'm hoping this doesn't go through. There seems to be a lot of pushback from different advocacy groups and what I've been involved in, others, and you see in Toronto as well, the biking lawyer as well. He's been made some comments around it too. So there's a lot of people are pushing against this and also signing petitions and stuff like that. So we'll see what happens, especially since this is just a leaked document as far as we're aware of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I'm glad there's a lot of advocacy work happening to push back against this, and that there are voices who are actually coming up and saying like, whoa, like this is not going to, achieve the goals that you want, right?
Yeah. And there's a lot of this pandering too in these situations, and Doug Ford has said it's like, we're going to keep the bikes on the side streets. And I see that a lot. We had that here in Vancouver a few years ago when we were talking about the Broadway plan and how they axed bike lanes that were supposed to be on this main thoroughfare, right? It's like, that's great. We need to disentangle traffic, but also we shouldn't restrict people from rolling into the places they need to go. That's where all the businesses are. That's the destinations. We need safe places to go along those corridors.
Yeah. And what if I don't live on a side street, right? Like then immediately guaranteed part of my trip is going to be made more dangerous, right? If I live on a collector or on an arterial, right? And if that's included in part of my journey, if it must be included in part of my journey, that's additional friction for me to adopt an additional mode of transportation, right? This kind of ties in. So Skitch says here, this proposed legislation is so inequitable. It sounds like the only way to get bike lanes would be taking away the already limited space dedicated for pedestrians. I think this is a great point. People need to get around their cities however they can or however they want to, frankly. Nobody's talking about ripping up the streets and not allowing cars to get around, right? People can drive, people can walk, people can bike, people can take transit around the city. But when you, for some reason, decide that one of those modes just isn't okay, even though you probably, as a government, you probably have climate goals and you probably have like healthcare that you got to pay for, and you probably have other traffic safety concerns that you have.
Committed to Vision Zero.
All three of those things are helped by bike lanes. You don't want to get rid of bike lanes. You want more options, not fewer. This ties in the video that I made. I talked about getting around by transit, and somebody commented, and it wasn't a mean comment, but they commented asking how long the trip is and how long it would take to bike it. And I said, well, it would take about 50 minutes for me to bike it, but I chose not to mention cycling in my video. I chose not to mention driving in my video because for some people, transit is the only option, right? Like we need all options of modality because different things work for different people.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's about the variety. And that's like, I had a conversation with somebody online about this, and that was my ultimate thing that I said, this is it. Like, it's not about taking away things from people. It's not about taking away driving. It's about giving more options to everybody. And it's always, you see this all the time is people, when we talk about cycling and public transit, they say, well, what about the people who can't ride a bicycle? It's like, what about the people who can't drive? That's what we're trying to address here. That's the thing we're trying to fix. We're not trying to take away anything. We're trying to add it. And the biggest thing about this particular motion, whether or not it comes in, is like, okay, there are so many cities in Ontario that this is not even an option. You have no other option to build a bike lane. Like, if you look, like, I think about Vancouver, we're all, just perfectly north, south, west, east streets. Like, it's just blocks. But on Ontario, all the sprawl, all the cities have sprawl, and all those neighborhoods are big, winding roads with cul-de-sacs. You can't build a good network of through streets through those places. It's very rare that you'll find the place to actually make a non-convoluted route to bike through. And that's a big point here, is like you're banning any possibility of having an efficient route to get anywhere except in a car. And that's what we already have. And that's not going to help anybody. But there is somebody had mentioned that there's a hack that they can do to get around this legislation, which is turn a driving lane into a parking lane, and then 2 weeks later turn that parking lane into a bike lane. I was like, just malicious compliance.
That's one way to do it.
Yeah.
It was a parking lane for a week, and then it turned into a bike lane.
Yeah.
It was never a driving lane. It was always a parking lane.
Yeah, just gaslight.
Yeah, no. It was never a driving lane. You must be crazy to think people were driving down this lane.
Yeah, there's another good comment here from Jen. She says approximately 20% of older persons who lose their driver's license experience depression afterwards. That comes from the National Institutes of Health. That is a huge, huge deal. I've talked to a lot of elderly people who use transit and who are frustrated because transit doesn't necessarily take them to their doctor's appointments. It doesn't necessarily take them to their children or grandchildren. It doesn't take them to their friends' houses because we've built transit around the 9-to-5 commuter, right? Who works downtown, right? And so there's this large demographic who misses out on transit, and a lot of elderly people. A lot of the time they might not have the license anymore because of health reasons, whether it's cognitive or physical. They might also not have a license anymore because of financial reasons. Maintaining a car is incredibly expensive, and it might not even be their fault. I've talked to 2 ladies on transit who their cars got hit and they broke down and they had to be written off. And they didn't have the money to buy a new car. And so now they have to use transit, right? It's not always a choice. And so that's why we need a variety of choices so that when somebody has to rely on something, they can use that, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
even if it's temporary, I mean, a lot of people that I've spoken to when taking transit around the Las Vegas Valley has been, hey, my car has been broken down for the past couple of days. It's in the shop. I have to take the bus. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll teach you how to use the bus because, I mean, it's just a lot of people also aren't very well educated on it either. But it's making those options easier for people to use and easier to access to actually get proper multimodal transit within our cities. So that way we don't have to rely on driving everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. And it builds resilience. Ultimately, having these multimodal options for when your car does break down, or you're just in a tough spot and you can't drive, but hey, you have a bike. Oh, at least there's a nice bike lane I can take. Boom. Or there's this really good built-up transit that comes every 15 minutes or sooner.
Yeah. Having options matters. Nick, I want to hear your last thoughts on this before we pass it off to Ethan for his story.
Fuck Doug Ford.
All right.
That's all
Ethan,
I got.
Many people are saying this.
That is true. That is actually true. Yeah.
All right, folks. Well, that leads us perfectly right into our next story. We're going to head down back to the States where Amtrak is up to some interesting route changes. So you may have heard it in the news, but Amtrak is getting a brand new long distance route. And that's a little misleading because it's not really a new route. Here, I'll share my screen where I actually have the route pulled up. It's taking the name of an old route, but it is essentially called the Floridian. And what this route is, it's a route from Chicago to Florida. Now, what you might notice about it is that it takes a stop in Washington, D.C. Now, the reason for this is that this is actually a combination of 2 already existing routes. We have the Capital Limited and we have the Silver Star. Now, the reason why Amtrak is doing this is not so much an actual serious improvement of services, even though it does have some improved service where it's now a one-ride trip and you no longer have to connect in Washington, D.C. if you're coming from Chicago or Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and going down to Florida or North Carolina. But the real reason is that Amtrak's older long-distance rolling stock is actually starting to run a bit long in the tooth, and they really are working on just kind of consolidating what they have so that way they don't have to run these 2 separate things. because they're one of their cars that they run on these trains is called the Superliners, and these Superliners are I think they're about 30 or 40 years old at this point, but Amtrak's running really low on them. So this whole thing is, one, to consolidate train cars, and two, to free up some rail traffic in the New York City tunnels that enter into Penn Station. So the old Silver Star route used to run all the way from Miami to New York City. However, this will essentially get rid of the Silver Star and run it through DC up towards Chicago. So it really is kind of a consolidation due to a lack of rolling stock at the end of the day. That's really the main reason, and also to free up space. But it does add some convenience if you are a traveler making a 2-seat ride, now a 1-seat ride. But really, this isn't a new route. It's more or less just consolidation, and it really kind of shows how, at least passenger rail in North America, we've really got to do a better job of actually investing in our rolling stock and making these decisions on actually getting this new rolling stock sooner and investing into our rail rather than waiting. But what do you guys have to think about this? Do you think that this is going to be an improvement to service, or do you think that it's really just kind of a linear sidestep, like, honestly, I do?
Yeah, it doesn't seem like a huge change, Nick.
No, yeah, I totally. That's what I was going to say. Like, it just seems like you said, a sidestep.
Yeah. The one thing that I did want to say, because I've seen the conversation online is kind of around this, well, I could fly from Chicago to Miami for cheaper and much, much faster. And I'm like, yes, you could. Except nobody is going to, or I shouldn't say nobody, but very few people will be taking the train the entire length, right? It's about creating the network, right? When I take transit in Calgary, I'll tend to get on at either Heritage Station or Chinook Station. I don't take the I rarely take the train from end to end. I'll usually hop off downtown. I usually don't even go beyond Sunnyside Station, right? Like, I'm not riding the train from end to end every day, and that doesn't mean that I walk around thinking, boy, why on earth would they put a station down in Somerset? Because obviously somebody down there uses it, and they might use it just to go to Chinook, but I'm getting on at Chinook, right? Like, it's about that network, right? So people might be taking the train from Chicago to Cleveland, not Chicago to Miami, right?
Yeah, so it really isn't like a creation of any new stations, but it is that, like, improved connectivity of the routes. And yeah, it is one thing that I've really seen a lot, is you do see a lot of people who, I'm just going to say this outright, don't know anything about Amtrak long distance, and have probably never taken Amtrak long distance, or any long distance trains for that matter, and say that they're basically just land cruises. And this is probably the most wrong thing ever, because Amtrak is used by a variety of different people, especially the long distance routes, to get to communities that are frankly underserved by other different types of transportation routes. Amtrak might be the only way you can actually get to some of these cities on this map. I mean, a lot of these smaller stops especially, too. Like, if you're talking about a city like, say, I don't know, Palatka, Florida, that's one that the only way you're getting there is by Amtrak. There's no Greyhound, there's just Amtrak. So it really is a way of connecting a lot of smaller communities, too, and building that network, as you said, Alex. And it really is frustrating when people don't understand that not everybody is taking the entire route.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, you're crazy like me.
That's so long. It's like 40-something hours. It's crazy.
Oh, that's not that long for Amtrak, Nick.
I guess you're right. But it just, like, seems wild to me. Like, if we actually had a great network of high-speed rail, which I'm not saying is practical for even every trip, but just between those two cities, what would it take? 8 hours? Maybe? Then again, there's a lot of stops along the way.
Yeah,
Jen
I mean...
Or go ahead, Ethan.
No, I was just going to say high speed is definitely something that would have less stops in between as well, too.
Sure.
So even these slower trains would serve more local, smaller stations that are generally underserved.
Yeah.
Jen was saying in the live chat, which you can join if you go to patreon.com/radiofreeurbanism, She says there was a Reddit user who said, "I'm so excited for this because I'm planning to go to Raleigh in March, and there was no direct train from Chicago or South Bend. Now there is." So this kind of combination of routes. Now you kind of skip the transfer, right? And that is one of the nice things about trains, is that you have stops, but not transfers. You basically just stay on board and keep on rolling. Patrick, you got any thoughts on this story?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I don't know too much about Amtrak. I've done my own research and look at what they do, but yeah, it as you kind of said earlier, it doesn't sound like it's, I guess, increasing by too much of what it is. But I am curious. Is there mention of frequency of this route, Ethan?
I believe that this one is going to be daily, if I'm not mistaken, which both the trains before it were daily. Both the Capital Limited and the Silver Star were both daily trains, and I believe that Amtrak is going to run it daily. However, this is a temporary route as well, too, so it's not a permanent change to the network. We'll see if Amtrak, once they decide to get their long-term rolling stock in contract for manufacturing, because it has been announced that they are looking into doing that. We'll see if Amtrak decides to keep the Floridian around, but they've also really been trying to go for reintroducing a more direct Chicago to Florida service on Amtrak. So we'll just have to see how it goes. But I mean, yeah, this kind of lateral movement with Amtrak, kind of just shuffling around and dealing with what they can right now, is something.
Right.
So this short-term bit is kind of just more because it's temporary. So that's just more for just to fill in some gaps as they try to reorganize everything. And for this route, if you were to take this route originally, you would have a few transfers.
Yeah, so you would have one transfer. So if you wanted to take this route from end to end, from Chicago to Miami, you would take the train, the Capital Limited, from Chicago to Washington, D.C., you would have like a 6 to 8 hour layover, and then you would take the train, the Silver Star, from Washington, D.C. all the way down to Miami. The Silver Star, though, did run from Chicago to New York City, so the reason, or the point of kind of shortening it to turn in D.C. and not make that connection is also to reduce the traffic congestion that is in the Hudson River tunnels in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I got a question it's somewhat related. Is that, like, a long trip like this, is like the train engineers, the actual people working on the train, do they get off, or do they do shifts on the? So
it depends. Engineers and conductors generally will change out like every 4 to 8 hours on the ride. So generally it's closer to every 4. So you'll have usually a decent stop where conductors will turn around and then head back towards their home base. Usually the cafe car attendants, the other attendants, like the sleeper car attendants, will usually stay on for the whole ride.
Okay.
And they'll have their own sleeping quarters on board for that.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is. And I think Via and a lot of other operators around the world kind of operate in a similar way when it comes to their long distance trains.
Right. Well,
interesting.
But it is. It's interesting. We'll see how well this route is effective when it comes to moving people along the Amtrak network. But it shares the name of an old route from Chicago to Florida. So welcome back the Floridian after 50 years of not being in service.
Welcome back. Ethan, before we move on to Patrick's story, do you have any crude final words you'd like to say about this, or maybe something a little nicer?
No.
Okay. All right. Then
there's no fuck Doug Ford line that I could really say for this one. This one's a little.
No, you could still use it.
We'll use it. Fuck Doug or fuck Ron DeSantis. How about that?
That one is good news. We'll go to Patrick now. Patrick brought us a story, which is always nice when a guest brings a story, because I feel like we tend to get kind of sucked into our 3 perspectives here, and with the news that we find and share around. And while Patrick is getting into this story, if Jen and Skitch, if you guys have questions that you want to load up for Patrick, we will ask him a couple after this story. So Patrick, go ahead, tell us what's going on.
Yeah. So this is more of a local thing. We're going back to Ontario. Actually, Nick had my original story, so I was like, okay, here's my
Sorry.
backup story.
Took the good one.
So this is a very local one to Kitchener, and I think it's a big improvement is where we're seeing more connectivity. Now, this news article that I have is kind of focusing on the delays on the highway because they closed the highway. I think it said they closed it at like, oh yeah, on Sunday at midnight. It was closed all Sunday, and then the plan was to have it closed and all the way till like Monday, like at 5 a.m. before everyone started driving and going everywhere. So from that, they actually finished early on like sometime in, I think it was like Sunday evening at some point actually. So they finished early, which was everything. But anyways, that was the focus of the article before the construction happened. I was just like, oh, there's gonna be significant delays and everything. But I couldn't find any articles that mentioned anything about the positive that was coming in from this, even though there were people talking about that, which is just adding the connection to, I guess, a lot of people that are kind of in a food desert to almost to some extent, and connect them across this main highway, Highway 78, that kind of cuts Kitchener up a little bit. And this brings connection to like I think it's Zayre's, Walmart. No, actually, no, it's just Walmart, I think, and a couple of other stores there. So it makes a great connection there. Also, it means you can also avoid the really dangerous roundabouts there. Actually, there's like 2 roundabouts really close. One's for an off ramp, and then the next one is kind of just connecting 2 major arterial roads, and it's dangerous to go there on a bike. There are multi-use paths that go along it, but people are kind of usually going pretty fast, either on the off ramp or off the off ramp and everything. So this creates a great alternative that goes, essentially you can go through a park, go through this little local residential street. You can go over this 4-meter wide pedestrian bridge. You can do your shopping, or you just use it as a connection point to the rest of the network that is ever growing in Kitchener Waterloo area. So I just wanted to bring that up this is cool to see these more connections, and there needs to be more of these connections made, because things like highways have cut up some of our communities in half and stuff like that. So I'd love to continue seeing more of those throughout Kitchener and throughout Canada, US, and other places where highways have cut us up in many ways.
Yeah, this is great. Nick, you've got something to say.
Yeah, no, totally. Like, highways have destroyed so many of our cities, and a big part of that isn't just because they absolutely bulldozed so many neighborhoods just to build them in the first place, but just the way that they disconnect us. Like, when I was in Detroit and my phone stopped working because Rogers sucks, even though I pay for, international usage, I couldn't use Lime anymore, even though that was my way to get around, was to, scan the code on the scooter. And I was like stranded, and I tried to walk like back to where, like, somewhere I knew there was like a bike shop that I could rent a bike, and you run into a highway and it's like, which way do I go? How many, kilometers do I have to walk until I can make it to this highway? It's in the middle of a city. It's crazy how few connections there are. And it's, it's really important that we reconnect these routes, because it's a big part of how we can get around our city and make it easier just to get things. Like you said, food deserts, that's a big problem.
Mm-hmm.
Ethan?
Yeah, it really is all about reconnecting our cities in some sort of way. I mean, it's incredibly inconvenient. Just the car dependency of everything, especially when you're dealing with highways and just trying to blend that into an urban fabric, because it's like oil and water. You cannot blend a highway into the urban fabric. You have high speeds and then pedestrians, and those do not mix well. And so creating a good separation between our highways and expressways and anything that's high speed for cars and pedestrians is what we really need to do, and really creating a buffer between those spaces is ideal.
Yeah, it's that disentangling that we talk about often on the show, and already talked about a little bit today, right? Cars and people, or at least people outside of cars and people don't mix, right? And so being able to have kind of this, a bit safer space for people to get around. There was one, you were talking about the off ramps, Patrick, and there was one place that my friend was telling me about here in Calgary, about where it kind of felt like people would almost get to wind up to go onto the highway on this one particular off ramp. And as they did so, they would cross this crosswalk that was very wide. It was connected to a very nice wide sidewalk that actually connects two quite walkable communities. But because of where this was, it just kind of adds this this extra level of danger, right? Because of the speeds people are getting to. And if we're not creating walkable spaces, and we don't come to expect people to be walking in areas, then when I'm driving my car, I'm not going to expect somebody to be at that crosswalk, because nobody's ever at that crosswalk. So in my head, I'm thinking, I don't need to slow down, right? And so I think as we rebuild our environment to be something for more people, I think we have some great opportunity to improve our cities. You got final thoughts on this, Patrick? And then we got to ask you questions here.
We have to.
I guess I just love to see. I guess the theme of my channel is true community. So I think that connection is really key, and even just being creative with it as well. Like there was somewhere kind of in the middle of the Netherlands, I saw they did a bit of a highway cap with this. I don't know the whole engineering bit around it, but it looked, wow, that's real cool. They essentially just capped a section, like, I think maybe a kilometer of the highway or something, and they just kind of turned a bit of it into green space, bike paths. They connected up some schools and some other things, and I kind of even I have like a map. I'm not sure if you guys ever used the service called felt.com. Great service to just envision things rather than just always using Google Earth, in my opinion. I find it a little more intuitive. But anyways, I kind of drew out a reimagining of what a cap over a section of Highway 78 would be in Kitchener. And I was like, oh, this would be just so cool. Great connections, and just you can make these nice paths. So I'd just love to see more of that, and just being creative with it and seeing how we can reconnect our communities, whatever that looks like. And not just with physical infrastructure, but even just in other ways as well. But I won't get too much in that.
I'm glad you mentioned your channel, because we're going to ask you a couple questions about that now, and maybe we can wrap these two together, because I think they probably go together a little bit. And that is, how did you come to urbanism? This idea of making our communities better, of making things more walkable, that sort of thing. And then what is the overall message of your channel, right? Where Ethan is a lot about transit, Nick is a lot about micromobility. I'm a lot about every now and then publishing something. Tell us about, what your overall message is and how you came to that.
Yeah, no, exactly. How I came to urbanism, well, that kind of, I think, started a bit when I had the opportunity to go to BC, actually. I went out there to study a little bit. And I was thinking, oh, I'm going out west. This will be cool. I can probably take transit and bike. I don't know why. I just thought that. I just thought that'd be kind of cool. I guess I had a little bit of experience in my city when I went to college. So I think that was kind of a bit of it. And that was back in 2017 now. So I went out to BC around 2017 or so. And I was interested. And it's like, then I got actually involved in more sports cycling when I was out there, because I realized there was many, many good bike lanes out there at that time, besides on the side of the road. But so from there, I think what really kicked it though into high gear, as you could say, is when COVID happened as well. So that's when it really kicked into high gear, of really diving deeper into it. I think it's just a little bit before I was as well, but and I think the main person of that kind of really got me into it was not just bikes, but I think it's for many people, from my understanding, at least during the COVID era of things. And so that was kind of how I came to urbanism, I would say. What kind of shapes the overall message of my channel per se would be, yeah, just a bunch of things. I saw people like Bicycle Dutch as well. I kind of get it home. Active Towns, John on there, love his content as well. Uh, and and then I think even the Urbanity as well is another Canadian content creator there as well. And there's even lots of others in the US, and I think the odd one in Europe as well. I think there are a few there as well. But so a lot of people have shaped it, and I've kind of listened to a lot of it. And some content creators, I guess, are a bit more critical and maybe harsher, and that there's a place for that. I believe I think we can't just be softies about everything. Of course, you need to take a little bit of a hard line on some things at points. But I definitely wanted to bring a bit more of a I guess, half glass full positive side of things, not ignoring the negatives, of course, and mentioning them, but not being overly harsh on them. I had some experience also in advocacy with my local cycling advocacy group in Kitchener-Waterloo. I was part of that, and I really got to know some people in the staff side of things, the planning side of things. I got to even go to a workshop by the Dutch Cycling Embassy, so that was really cool to meet some people from there too. So all those, plus, as some may know, Melissa and Chris Butland, this book really helped shape my channel as well. It really inspired me to actually start the channel in the first place, in addition to everything else. Because they do have their first book. Haven't actually read the first book, but I've read their Curbing Traffic book, which takes more of a psychological, and it says the human case for fewer cars in your lives. If you don't have this book, get it. Wherever you want to get a book. A really good book. And I just love the human case that that Chris and Melissa both talk about in this book a lot. And I think that's kind of where my true communities aspect came from. It's like, hey, yeah, there's more than just the infrastructure. It's how we are planning our places, like how are they in the form of density, and also how they are planned in the sense of proximity, and we're not just like, because it's much harder to actually connect communities when you have all this sprawl, and you're just putting some bike lanes and some better transit, or trying to at least get some better transit, and you can only do so much before you actually need to change what's there in some sense, which is much harder when you build it versus when it's something you get from a historic town or a city where you can just more easily integrate those things because there's that automatic density and automatic more, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Diversity in what's built, whether it's stores, shops, offices, small mechanics, everything. But so I think that's kind of what ended up leading to my overall message, which is how can we create communities that are going to thrive, and what does that look like? There's a lot to it. So I think I'm kind of going to be a bit more diverse in my content in that way because of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. And if anybody hasn't seen your channel, I just want to say, like, it really is like a good feeling, like a good feeling channel. You know, every video that you have up there kind of has that vibe. We have a question from Jen, which Ethan is going to bring here.
Yeah. So this is actually a really good question from Jen. And she asked, how did you get around in your small town? Did you need a car?
Good question. So I first moved to a small town south of London. That was I was living I took a bus to a small town where I went to secondary school. When I got married and everything, I moved to a town south of London. And that's where I was starting to get into urbanism. So we did have a small car. We had just one car for us as a family. We also kind of worked downtown too, so that was really nice. So I mostly walked there, so that was really nice. And then we went to other parts of the town. Usually I had gone on my bike, and eventually I bought a used, or as the store calls it, a pre-loved Dutch bike from Go Dutch Bikes in Toronto. If you haven't heard of them, go get their bikes. They're great. You can get some nice quality European bikes that are nice and solid. So that's what I used as my main form of transportation. I biked to the farmer's market. I I biked to the stores, or even in the evenings, when I was still kind of doing some also recreational, I kind of biked around all over town there. And um, it's kind of funny for I know someone who lived there longer than I have, and I knew the streets better than they did because I just biked all over the place in the evening at some point.
It
So
really
it's
does.
really
Like,
cool. When I
yeah,
realized it, I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. That this is kind of see that when you walk around or take transit or even bike around, you really get to know the layout of your town and your city, what's
yeah,
around. So I discovered some nice parks sometimes. Like, oh, there's a small little grocery store here.
yeah.
So that's
Mhm.
something that I didn't really. We used this car, but it was mostly for going to visit family or to another town or city. So yeah.
Yeah,
So I
it's
did need a car, but not in town,
yeah,
really.
it's really nice the effect you can get from walking and cycling. You get to learn your city's landscape on a granular level and really discover things. And it's becoming, I heard this recently. Being a tourist in your own city, which is a cool thing because you get into such habits a lot of the time that you forget to explore and find things that exist in your city that you may have never seen before. And on two wheels is one of the best ways to do that. We have another question, though. This is from Skitch in the live chat, wondering if you have any advice for using blogs, YouTube, and social media platforms to share content. My partner has a similar suite of mediums for his urbanism brand, and I'm wondering if you found certain platforms to do better for certain types of content.
Good point. Blogs. I'm not sure how effective they are as of recently. I know some people have certain thoughts around blogs that you might as well just make a video instead. But if that's not your forte, then obviously then don't want to make too many videos where they're just kind of poor. But hey, you can experiment. But yeah, I guess for advice around that, I guess I did do that bit as part of my job, social media side of things. So hopefully I can give you some good advice at least. But for blogs, yeah, I found that blogs are really nice if you want to complement them with a video if you can. You don't have to, but I found they can complement a video, and I think Bicycle Dutch does this well. If you see his content, you have usually his ride videos or a themed video a little bit, and then there's pretty much I think always a corresponding blog that goes with it. I right now have probably more blogs than video at the moment, and I kind of hope to kind of make a video for each blog, but I'm not sure if that's going to actually happen. So that's kind of my advice around blogs. YouTube, I'm still pretty new at YouTube. Other guys on here, this podcast are getting more views than I am and have more subscribers, so they may be a little better on that side of things. And but no, I find YouTube is great, especially if you are going to connect with the blog. I think is but not required. This is just from my experience, of course. Social media platforms to share content on. Yeah, I think it just really depends on what your medium is. There are going to be more photos or short videos, then you want to ideally be on those platforms. So that's going to be Instagram, TikTok if you want to, and there's some cross sharing you can do with like from Instagram to Threads and stuff like that, so you can expand your audience a little bit as well. But yeah, no, I think it's best if you want to, I guess, have a audience across all platforms. You do need to not just copy and paste everything. That's something that I learned from my brother who went for a business degree, and he said, if you just post everything the exact same thing on each thing from your blog to your YouTube to your TikTok, and it's not the medium's not, I guess you could say, focused on each like strength of that platform, then people are just going to stick to one platform, and you're going to have a less of a following on one platform versus another. Versus if you like have a long form video on YouTube, cut it up for TikTok and Instagram, that's good. That's fine. If you have a video but you expand more on a blog, then you can direct people from your video and your YouTube, like direct people to a blog. That's a key thing that I've heard from others and also used myself. If you want people to actually go to different forms of content you are making, especially if you have a good audience on YouTube or TikTok or Instagram, you actually say it and point to them, make it like easy or something like that for them to go to those different mediums. So found certain platforms perform better than others for content. Yeah, I guess it's more really experiment. I don't have a lot of experience compared to some others who are on here, like everyone else here. But yeah, that's what I can share at the moment, at least for that. And maybe I'll update you as I continue making more content.
Yeah, and I think your point about it, depending, what you're making is big, right? There are lots of different Instagram accounts that are about urbanism, but they don't have YouTube channels accompanying them, right? And then, YouTube is really great because it does get get kind of the algorithm boost. And TikTok is great for that as well. Instagram can be as well if you're doing the reels. But yeah, I think that's some great insight. We have a whole thing from okay. We actually have
a
some
couple
more
of pieces of listener mail.
I forgot it. We had the email as well. Okay. I will read Jen's next question. This is a question for everybody, and we'll do this one kind of rapid fire style because then we've got Nick to read the email from Lindsay there. Here's Jen's question. You get to help design an urbanism video game. What would you ask to be featured in the game? And I'll let Ethan go first.
Oh, you're too kind, Alex. But I mean, we already have Urbanism, the video game, and it's called City Skylines with about 50 trillion mods installed. But no, if there was something that I could just add into the game, it would just be streetcars, and you can just really go ham on customizing what kind of little streetcars you want. If you want to make them all the way from fully high-scale light rail transit all the way down to the little tourist trolley, yeah, that would be in game.
That'd be very cute, very cute. I'll go next. I actually, thinking about it, I'm kind of like, that's kind of Stardew Valley. Stardew Valley, like, I think there's like some room to do like urbanist stuff in Stardew Valley. I don't know what it is, but I was just thinking that I'm like, that's almost like an urbanist game, right? You're just living this nice, peaceful, quiet life in this cute small town. Your friends are nearby, so that's what I'd go with. Nick, you're next.
Oh, this is hard. Okay, if we're just talking about City Skylines, it's a game I've played quite a bit. Haven't played it in a long time, but the one thing I'd like to see is on a granular level, see the interactions between the citizens of your city, especially conflict. I think that would be so much fun. Like, you've got bike lanes and stuff. You can add that with mods and everything. Make sweet customized routes for trams. But I want to see, like, people fight on the street. Like, the real shit. The stuff that actually happens in real life.
See, I want just a peaceful life, but all right. And Jen's in line with you there in the live chat, which you can join, by the way, if you go to patreon.com/radiofreeurbanism. Jen says, my game would include flipping trucks out of the bike lanes. So, what about you, Patrick? What would you have in your video game?
Ooh. City Skylines is great. I'm enjoying City Skylines 2 and the progress they made even after it was a kind of a poor launch. But I think what I would like is kind of what I've seen in the game Junctions. I'm not sure if have you seen the trailers for that yet?
No.
Okay, so this is like a really cool game where you essentially can actually, I can't remember the space, but you can essentially load in the geographic area of a certain area in it, and then you got elevation, buildings, market, and then you can do your own roads. Like what I really want to see, that I'd like to see in City Skylines built in, is where you essentially have you can choose your lane dimensions for each thing, whether it's a lane or it's a border or it's a boulevard of trees. Here, yeah, you see it on the trailer. This is really good. It's really cool. If you haven't seen it yet, you have to check it out and join the Discord. Yeah, that exact lane configuration, I'd love to see that in City Skylines. There is a mod that does do that to some extent, but we don't have bike lanes yet. But this game's coming out in 2025, not sure when, but maybe you can go on Discord and contact with the developer. He's in, don't let me screw up this, Czech. I think he's one of the Czech Republic or something like that.
Okay.
One of those, he's an Eastern European, but this game's apparently even being supported. He has a grant and stuff for it and everything too. But yeah, so if I could have, I want this as a game.
That's pretty cool.
That's my game. That's the simple way of saying it. And yeah,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
dig this. This is actually very cool. Okay. Well, add that to the Christmas wish list, Christmas 2025. Nick, you got this last email
Oh
here
boy,
from
we
Lindsay?
got a wall of text from our friend over at History Leisure. We got here. Yes, hello again, lads. It's Lindsay from History and Leisure and Beyond the Queue. I have an article lined up for October 2nd on my Substack, analyzing a 6th elementary school plan for the school district I graduated from, replacing disused offices. The district plans to open the new school in 2027, and the main resolution will allow is a full day kindergarten, which will somehow overhaul the whole elementary school curriculum according to a PowerPoint. It doesn't have any housing in its walk shed, or even if it is, there is obviously no sidewalk right now. There's been talk about bike buses lately, but education in relation to transit and urbanism has a lot that should be explored sometime. It's not just about school shootings and parent pickup lines getting egregious. Sure, there are private schools, but zoning in the context of education tends to be a factor important for families, and the Northeast is known for good schools. Would be nice to see greater discussions on education within the community at large beyond the already addressed parent pickup plague. Keep up the good work, Lindsay. Where is Lindsay located? Do we know?
I think
Can't remember.
the Northwest, maybe?
The Northeast, I think.
Northeast.
Okay. I don't know if you meant like northeast of a city or something. Yeah, that's some good points in there for sure. Alex?
Yeah, I think the school stuff. So there are a lot of schools in my neighborhood. Probably, actually, it might have the most schools out of any neighborhood in Calgary. And yeah, there's like lots of kids biking, lots of kids walking, lots of school buses, parents dropping off, that sort of thing. Yeah, it is a big concern, like where you put schools and how you place them. But then also a consideration to remember is how communities grow and change over time, right? A lot of neighborhoods in Calgary, the first school that I went to, called Kingsland, they had to close down after I left. I was one of the last students that was there because the population of that neighborhood was aging. And so there wasn't there weren't kids or enough kids in the neighborhood to support that. So I think things like that are a huge reason why it's important to support diverse communities, right? So that you can actually support schools throughout this period. As far as like this is Nick's showing on the screen here. This is
this is in Dayton, Ohio. I'm showing the screen, which is a school. You may have seen it already. It's been kind of popular. It's basically there's a highway off ramp, and within the circle, one of the clover leaves of the off ramp, they put a school, which is just like
why?
It's maybe the most. It is maybe the most city skylines things I've ever seen in real life.
Yeah. It's things like this that should just never happen, and it all comes back to like this is the thing that I think about the most is when we talk about this and making our cities better is the kids. Like we have a say and we can work together to try to change things, but kids have no say in this, and we're putting them in positions which were worse for them right now and into the future. Like the brain development, talking about kids who get driven to school and go to places like this, sucking in fumes all day long versus a kid who rides to school in a nice, peaceful neighborhood. It makes a huge difference on the person's quality of life and their actual development. We need to really take that seriously.
Yeah,
Totally. I'd love to see this. I know it's a little off topic from the city, but in the rural areas, like I was maybe a 15-minute bike ride from my school, and I lived on the country road, so traffic was fine. But then you got to the highway, it had wide paved lanes, wide gravel lanes as well, which you could bike on, but it doesn't encourage you, at least. So I was probably one of the first people on the bus, and I had an hour over bus ride versus a 15-minute bike ride. I could have got up a little later or just a little more relaxing in the morning and then just go for a bike ride and have some activity before I start the school day. And we know there's studies that say that activity does encourage just that, I guess, engaging with your brain, and especially in the morning when you're just going through puberty and that whole time. So there's just so many of those things, that activity that we're missing for schools.
Yeah.
And I love to see what's happening in Kitchener, where we do have bike buses going on in the Waterloo part of Kitchener, Waterloo, and just even increasingly building a multi-use pathways at least that connect to newer built schools. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of crazy to see that. Who thought of that? Who was there first? Hopefully, it was not the off-ramp wasn't there first.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of wild seeing that picture from Dayton, that they put a highway around that. Ethan, you got any thoughts on this? And then I think we can lead into a little rapty-dapty-doo.
Yeah, I do believe that would be a good idea. But yeah, I mean, just building schools to be an actual environment that's healthy to, exist in. Kids are spending most of their days at these schools, and it would be best to actually build an environment that's going to be positive towards them and is going to be safe around the school. And building schools in areas that are just completely, car-dependent Strode havens is not only going to be bad mentally, it's going to be bad physically. It's just, we need to build better spaces, not just for ourselves, not just to be selfish, but to be selfless and build spaces for, the future generations that are going to use these spaces, and for when we're older and we're using these spaces and we don't have the same physical abilities that we do now.
Yeah, I think that's huge. Well, with that, I think that's a great place to end it, and we'll wrap this little party up. Patrick, do you want to tell us where the good people can find you on the internet?
A good point. Yeah, you can find me on pretty much every platform out there, which is probably not a good thing. But yeah, so I'm pretty much everywhere. I'm just at True Communities equivalent on Mastodon, as you say it, and Blue Sky, Twitter, Threads and Instagram on True Communities, True.communities, and then Facebook as well, and YouTube. I think maybe TikTok as well. So that's where you can find me. I'm pretty much on all platforms, just True Communities, or you can find my blog. All my links are there too, or on YouTube, all my links are there as well. So
Perfect.
Should be pretty easy to find me.
Perfect.
Yeah, and we'll have the links down below for that. Ethan, fill us in.
Folks, you can find me over at Climate and Transit on pretty much every platform, mainly YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads. And if you want to join my Discord as well, too, and become part of the Climate and Transit community, that's open as well. Or if you want to join the Radio Free Urbanism Discord, just join the Patreon and you'll be right on in. Nick, where can the good people find you?
Oh, you guys know where to find me. You can find me at Nick the Door on YouTube, Instagram, and Threads. And who's next? Alex?
Me.
Alex,
Pick me,
tell
pick
us.
me.
Please tell us where.
You can find me at Humane Cities on Instagram and YouTube, and at Alex Williams YYC on Threads. And Instagram, if you want to follow me on Instagram. I don't have much urbanist stuff there, but it's a party.
You can go bother him there, everyone.
Yeah, go bother me.
Exactly.
And with that, Patrick, do you have a catchphrase? At the end, we all say a catchphrase. So if you have a catchphrase, now is the moment.
Okay. What was the example of your catchphrase?
My catchphrase is feet first.
Okay.
Mine
Nick?
is train good, car bad, and Nick's is...
Two wheels good.
I'm might not cement this in, but I'll go. I got one.
Okay, all right, hit it.
Gotcha.
Thriving communities.
I like that. Ethan.
That is a good one. Folks, thank you so much for watching the show. We really appreciate your support. Patrick, thank you for joining us. And as always, train good, car bad.
Two wheels good.
And feet first.